What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
So, Nick, the talk is sort of resurfacing again that Islam Makhachev does have his sights set on becoming a champ. Now, whether that'll be immediate or if he'll get in there with Oliveira or Gaethje or somebody in between that's yet to be determined. But Colby Covington is certainly adding fuel to the fire. He's saying he's going to beat Leon Edwards, and then he's going to show everybody that American wrestling is better than Dagestani wrestling.
Ooh.
And one thing we know for sure is those are fighting words for Islam Makhachev and Team Khabib. But I have to say, it really is an interesting notion to think that Islam could fight the winner of Leon versus Colby, because he's talked openly about fighting both of them before. Leon back over the summer, and now the Colby talks are starting to resurface a little bit. And I think that would be an excellent matchup either way. And quite controversially, I think it might be the best matchup for Islam, seeing the current landscape of the 155 division.
Yeah, if you're a current fan of the UFC, you understand that the modern era is all about a champion going for champ status. Now, it has to be when the time is right. You know, I don't think, like Conor McGregor did, you can really get your belt and then move immediately up. That's going to be a little bit more difficult to finagle, and you kind of have to be a big star before you can get those kinds of favors from the UFC. But Islam Makhachev is at that point now. He's about to tie Khabib for the most title defenses at 155, and if he's able to do that, then it sort of looks like the front of the 155 division isn't going to serve any issues or problems for him, and we're going to have to wait for a new star or a new number one contender to emerge before he really is convinced that somebody can get in there and beat him, because everybody that is at the top or seems to be next in line for the shot, you know, your Charles Oliveira, Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, all these guys, Benny Dariush, have either lost to him, lost to Khabib, or lost to each other, and it doesn't really seem like a competitive matchup. So financially, this is the absolute right move for Islam. And anybody that gets a UFC gold belt should entertain this as the option. And it's not even because they're trying to hold a belt hostage. It's simply a financial move. I think Islam Makhachev understands that he's the champ at 155. If he goes up, he gets to have another fight. It's going to be a great payday for him against the winner of Colby and Leon. And I think he'd likely be the favorite, regardless of who they pick out of those two or who can get their hand raised out of those two, just because of how dominant he's looked lately and his fighting style in general. And the reason it makes so much sense financially is if he loses that fight, if he doesn't get his hand raised and become the champ, he's still a champion. So his next fight is still involving pay-per-view points. And that's really why people are going for these champ maneuvers. And Islam, just like any of the other champions, has deserved that right to do it. And until the 155 division can shake itself out and we can really emerge a number one contender that's not Charles Oliveira, who clearly doesn't want to fight Islam and really doesn't have any chance at beating Islam, I think it makes the most sense for him. I think it makes the most sense for the UFC to try to do that. Anytime you can wrap two belts around one guy's waist, it just seems to add a level of power, a level of dominance, and is something that the public, the generals, the casuals, the masses can understand. Okay, this guy's really good, and not only can he beat everybody at his weight class, but he moved up a weight class and he can beat everybody there. I just think that Islam Makhachev at this current moment doesn't have any heavy lifting to do at 155 right now, but he seems like the kind of guy that wants to stay active, stay busy, and break some records, create an amazing legacy, and moving up to 170 would do just that.
Yeah, and the argument, the pushback that you'll get from a lot of the purists that want to see him stay and compete against the 155ers is, well, you know, Charles is very powerful. Charles could catch him. But you can make that argument for any two fighters. You pick two fighters out of a hat. Right. It could be a guy that just came into the 155 division, and it could be Islam Makhachev, and the guy that just came into the division could catch Islam Makhachev. Right. So that whole getting caught thing is not really a valid argument, seeing as how Islam beat Charles the first time. Right. He submitted the submission ace. Charles was the guy who, if he had a chance against Islam, it was going to be a sneaky submission from the bottom. It was going to be a choke, a head and arm triangle, a rear naked choke. He was going to get to his back somehow and throw in a rear naked choke. But Islam submitted him that way. He advanced, he rocked him first, then he advanced position, got the head and arm triangle. Now, I'm not saying Charles Oliveira is not deserving of another title shot. Everybody can lose, and Charles Oliveira did lose on that night, unfortunately for him. But I'm thinking ahead to what does the fight feel like? And we always talk about big fight feel. Like when you hear a fight get announced, you just go, ooh, I got to see that. And the people start to talk about it and people start to get really excited, mark that day down on their calendar. And if it's Covington, now I don't want to say it's getting past Leon is no easy task, and it very easily could be Leon Edwards. But if it's Covington, when you hear Colby Covington versus Islam Makhachev for the undisputed 170 belt, that announcement stops you dead in your tracks.
That's
and
a
you're
mega
like,
fight.
That's a mega fight.
Right.
That's a huge fight. It does probably double the pay-per-view numbers that the Oliveira rematch would do. And then it's like, okay, well, there's Justin Gaethje there. Justin's very skilled. I don't want to take anything away from him. But I'm not sure that Justin is going to give Islam the same level of competition that either Leon or Colby would. And it's very interesting because I think, truthfully, if I'm being honest, Colby matches up better against Islam than Leon does. But I think Leon could have the upper hand on Colby. It's one of those MMA math round robin things. I think Islam, if he were to fight Islam, if he were to fight Leon, my early prediction would probably be Makhachev.
Yeah.
But Colby fighting Islam Makhachev, that's very interesting because Colby can meet him as far as the pace is concerned. He can meet him as far as the output and striking is concerned. He can meet him in the grappling exchanges. Now, Colby is a little bit smaller of a 170 fighter, so Islam may even be slightly bigger come fight night. We don't know. We haven't seen that fight transpire yet. But it's definitely an interesting thing to discuss, seeing as how dominant Islam just looked against Volk in the rematch. And then 8 weeks later, you have this mega fight at 170, and both of those people have Islam's name on the tip of their tongue. So I do think that's inevitable. And if the UFC wants to make an Oliveira rematch in the interim, and then after Ramadan, sometime in the summer for International Fight Week, let Islam get in there and fight for champ status, I'm cool with it. But I do want to see him fight the winner of this fight at some point.
Yeah, I do too. And I think that Volkanovski, after a full camp, was the best next option at 155. I think that would have been a better fight, a more competitive fight than Charles Oliveira #2. And Charles Oliveira, let's not forget, he got controlled in every realm of a mixed martial arts contest that they went through when he fought Islam, and he got finished after being controlled for every single minute of every single round of that fight that was able to be contested. Volkanovski, it was very much a back and forth fight. And the fact that he took it on 9-10 days notice wasn't really fair for him, but that sort of changes everything at 155. And everyone knows that 155 in the UFC has been and will always be the creme de la creme of all divisions. It's the top, it's the most competitive, but the top of it right now sort of feels stagnant. It feels stuck in the mud. And none of the guys are really ponying for their shot. It sort of feels like, here, you go in there and fight Islam next. Let's see what happens with you. And everybody's just kind of pushing the job off to somebody else. Justin Gaethje saying, I'll just sit and wait until my turn comes. And that's sort of like the Stipe Miocic approach, which personally I hate. I think activity is always your friend when it comes to being a number one contender and being potentially an alternate fighter and then getting your eventual title shot. So I don't want to see Justin Gaethje, take his oars out of the water. I want to see him go in there and compete, show us that he's still right in it with everybody else in the top of the guys, and let Islam Makhachev go do his thing at 170. He seems like the kind of guy that's disciplined enough to maintain champ status at 2 divisions if he's able to get his hand raised at 170. And it seems like 155 is his division. It was Khabib's division. Now it's his. And even though the weight cuts are hard for him, I don't think he's ready to leave 155 completely and just move up to 170. I think if he's going to become a champ, which that's something he wants to do, he's going to want to actually defend both belts simultaneously. And that speaks to his character. Those guys aren't there like a Conor McGregor. Like, everybody knew Conor McGregor had no intentions of ever cutting to 145 or even weighing 145 pounds again after he won that belt the first night. But he was more than happy to entertain the thought, right? Let me get this belt and then I'm going to move up to 55. And then don't worry, I've got business to handle down here. Y'all, I'm going to keep the belt. Don't worry about that. But I'm just going to go do this real quick and then don't worry about it. And then next thing you know, he moves from 45 to 55 over to boxing, and then he's at 170 shortly after that. And then everything just sort of unraveled on the 145ers that were just waiting there for Conor McGregor, and they never got their red panty night. So I think that Islam Makhachev could be the guy to stay active at both divisions. But until somebody injects a little bit of interest, injects some sort of entertainment and controversy at 155, I think they're just going to be sitting there pointing their fingers at one another until somebody eventually gets their hand raised or gets called by the UFC and says, hey, you're fighting Islam next. He'll make quick work of them, and then he'll probably go back up to 170, which is why I wanted to bring up Conor McGregor one more time. Everybody knows that he's still the biggest draw in all of combat sports, and he's always one win away from a world title fight. Now, I don't want to say that I think Conor McGregor versus Islam Makhachev for the undisputed 155 title fight is happening anytime soon or even going to happen in 2024. But if these guys at the top of 155 don't start getting their stuff together and start calling each other out, fighting each other, making compelling arguments for themselves to get the next shot at Islam Makhachev, one win against anybody at any weight class, it could be Michael Chandler at 185. A win like that for Conor McGregor would put him right back in the mix with Islam. And everybody knows the story, the history that Conor has with Team Khabib. If he's able to get his hand raised against Michael Chandler, who everybody still sees as a top 3 draw and a top 3 contender at 155, you could see the Notorious One right back in the mix at the top of 155, stealing that great number 1 contendership and that title fight away from a bunch of guys that are deserving it.
Yeah, make no mistake about it. If Conor McGregor knocks out Michael Chandler, the UFC will make Islam Makhachev versus Conor McGregor for the undisputed 155 belt.
100%.
Or if Islam is able to get the 170 belt in between,
right,
they'll let Conor fight at 170 because he doesn't really like to cut anymore and he's a lot bigger than he used to be.
That's right.
But that is a certainty. Whether it's fair or not, we can have that debate, but that will happen.
Absolutely.